Hello and welcome to episode 120 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast where two friends stopped arguing about movies and started working through them together. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Evling. As we look back on 2023, we're completing the other half of the Barbenheimer Challenge and watching Barbie, directed by Greta Gerwig. Unless you lived under a rock last year or are listening to this episode years in the future, you know that Barbie was everywhere last year, and a retrospective on 2023 kind of requires a discussion of this movie. As fans of this movie and Greta Gerwig generally, we were excited to talk about one of her movies for the first time.
Barbie was officially the biggest movie of the year in 2023. A hit with critics and audiences, it grossed over $1.4 billion and was nominated for 8 Oscars. For much of the year, it seemed to be the frontrunner even for Best Picture, but in the end, it only won 1 Oscar for Best Original Song. Such a cultural phenomenon is rare these days, and the fact that a feminist toy tie-in movie connected so well with audiences put Barbie in rarefied air.
But does box office success mean the movie's any good?
Or does Barbie leave us asking, what was it made for? Keep listening.
Hey Barbie, check me out.
You can't do a flip like that, Ken.
This is a real rager, Barbie.
Thanks, Barbie. Gosh, this night is just perfect. It's perfectly perfect.
And you look so beautiful, Barbie.
Thanks, Barbie. I feel so beautiful. So do I.
This is the best day ever.
It is the best day ever, and so is yesterday, and so is tomorrow, and so is the day after tomorrow, and even Wednesdays, and every day from now until forever. Do you guys ever think about dying? I don't know why I just said that. I'm just dying to dance.
All right, so that is Barbie having the existential crisis that kicks off the action in Barbie.
And Barbie Land.
In Barbie Land, and the real world was already broken by reality.
Right.
So reality kind of seeped into Barbie Land a little bit, and it came in the form of Barbie thinking about dying.
Thus the crisis that sets off the journey, really, in the movie.
I don't want to jump too far ahead, but a really fantastic Margot Robbie in this movie.
Absolutely, yes. No qualms there.
All right.
But here we are, so we're doing the second half of Barbenheimer.
Yep.
Well, the first in the word.
Yeah, I don't know if if you're supposed to watch one before
I don't
the
think
other or not.
It's just I only mean for this podcast, the second half, kind of completing the pie that is Barbenheimer.
Right.
So
because as we said last time, Opby doesn't really work. Barbenheimer
sounds
works
robotic.
a lot better. Yeah, Opby.
Sounds like a synthesizer of some sort. But if you haven't listened, you can go back and listen to our Oppenheimer episode, and it as part of our mission to kind of revisit some of last year. Just made sense. This is the next movie to do.
And maybe we've got our own Barbenheimer challenge. Listen to both episodes in the same day.
I think that's very doable.
Very more doable than watching both movies in one day.
Yeah. Now, I mean,
especially
you could try to watch
the theaters.
You could try watching both movies and then listening to our podcast.
Listen to Oppenheimer, watch Oppenheimer, listen to our episode, watch Barbie.
Yeah.
Listen to Barbie.
Yeah.
That's a tougher challenge. Then.
Yes. But if you can do it, I want to hear it. I want to hear about it. I want to hear the comments and the feedback on that.
And I want to know how you find all that time.
That's mostly what I want to hear in the comments and feedback.
Right.
So let us know. But here we are, Barbie. You know, it wasn't that long ago that we watched this movie last summer.
Yeah, it wasn't even a year ago.
Right. I mean, we're still kind of fresh off of the phenomenon.
Yeah.
But we are, I think, a little bit. It's subsided at this point, and I feel like we can, because the Oscars are over. And
my question is the backlash done?
I don't know. I guess we'll find out in our conversation.
That's true.
I think
we'll uncover that.
We'll decide that.
Yeah.
But that's a good question, I think, is if the backlash is done. And if also, even if it's done within sort of the media landscape and the social media world, like, is it done with us?
Yeah.
As we rewatched it.
Yeah.
Because I think, there was so much discussion around this movie. Mm-hmm. Like before it was released, when it was released, then later during awards season. It just seemed like Barbie was always in the conversation. Mm-hmm. And now that seems to have maybe died down a little, and that's when we decided to rewatch it. And it was hard, I think, not to bring all of that
all those questions and sorts of things
into it.
I agree. So let's go back to the time where we didn't have all those questions before the existential crisis.
So if we're going to talk about first viewings, one thing I want to ask you is, even before first viewings, like the lead up to this movie.
Yeah.
Because we're both Greta Gerwig fans. I think you have actually watched her movies a lot more than I have.
I've watched Little Women a lot more than you have.
Yeah, I've only seen that one, I think, twice.
Oh, man.
But you've
probably seen it 5 or 6 times.
Right.
I have called it, and I'm going to, I think I put it in my Letterboxd review on it. I don't think I've said it on air. I have called it a perfect movie.
Whoa.
I think Little Women is a perfect movie. And we haven't gotten into that. That might even be like a whole episode.
What does that mean? Yeah.
I think there are perfect movies. There are several. You know, it's not the perfect movie, right? Like, I think Jaws is a perfect movie. I would say a movie that sets out to do what it does and could not be improved.
Just impeccable and flawless in what it's
doing.
Right. And how it's put together.
I'm not saying, like, you know, put Little Women up next to whatever you think is the best movie, whatever, that Little Women's going to
dominate that.
Whatever. I'm just saying, for what Greta Gerwig set out to do with Little Women, Little Women's a perfect movie.
Yeah. I mean, as in, I get what you mean. I don't know if I would agree or not. But
you've only seen it twice. So you wouldn't know, would you?
I just can't get that Bob Odenkirk cameo out of my head.
That might be the only thing that is less than perfect.
It just kind of pulled me out of it, I remember.
I can understand that.
But yes, I do love that movie. I've liked every movie that I've seen of Greta Gerwig's, and even going back to like Frances Ha,
the ones she co-wrote
with when she was doing her thing with Noah Baumbach, which she's doing here in Barbie as well. But being the fan of Greta Gerwig that you were, she had just come off a perfect movie.
A perfect movie, yeah.
She'd come off of this. And when you kind of found out this was what she was doing next, there's that part, and then also when the photos came out of like Ken and Barbie. What were your thoughts? Did it make you anticipate it more, less? Like, what were your thoughts going into Barbie?
Oh yeah, I was nothing but excited, honestly. I mean, I heard they're making a Barbie movie, and it's like, who cares? I didn't really care when they made Battleship or whatever.
Were you surprised that she would be that would be her thing, that she would want to make a Barbie movie?
I think out in a vacuum, if you had said, would Greta Gerwig make a Barbie movie, I'd be like, probably not. But when it was announced, I was sort of like, that's going to be great. It's going to be really interesting. And I think there had been some precedent with like the Lego movie or I don't know if I can think of another one, but like with the Lego movie, where it's like you can do a tie-in that could on the surface just be a cash grab for the studio and the toy company, but that is actually really smart and gets us to think about it in a new way or revisit it.
And certainly, at least to some degree, very self-aware of what it is.
Yeah. I think meta movies are commonplace now. It's not.
They are.
It's not hard to get a broad audience to watch something meta.
Yeah, because I still remember the surprise of Lego Movie, of people being like, "Oh, you can do it this way."
Yeah.
It actually works pretty well, and it's pretty smart to just be very blunt and upfront about what you're doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and I'm with you, by the way. I was also nothing but excited to see the movie.
And then, I don't know, again, the timeline, how soon after, but when I heard it was being co-written by Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig, I was like, even better.
But I will say, you take Greta Gerwig's name away from Barbie, and I really didn't have any interest.
No.
It was solely because it was Greta Gerwig's movie and next movie. That was the key to me. Even though I do like Margot Robbie, I like Ryan Gosling, but I don't like either of them enough to see every single thing that they're in.
I don't think there's any actor that I think that's true.
I have to be completist about this actor.
Yeah, because
that's a good question. I don't actually.
They're working people. Like they make a lot of different types of things. But I do think Margot Robbie was involved as a producer, and I think you can kind of. She's developing a reputation that a Margot Robbie produced movie is going to have some level of quality to it.
Yeah, and with either of those actors, like I'm at least curious.
Yes.
Anything Ryan Gosling's in, anything Margot Robbie's in, I'm curious.
Yeah. Honestly, her depiction of Harley Quinn, and Ryan Gosling's really great ability to be goofy was
Yeah.
like, there's something there.
Right.
You know, it wasn't just A-list people being cast and I didn't really care.
And I recently, it just happened to be on and I rewatched I, Tonya.
Yeah.
And she's so good in that movie and in that role. And so I feel like Margot Robbie is also someone who is used to playing these roles of women that kind of have to prove themselves.
Yes.
Like you're going into it, you're going into these movies thinking like, I know
this
this
person.
Tanya Harding, Barbie.
Because you already know that person. I know Tanya Harding.
I know those
Barbie.
people. What are you going to tell me that's new and fresh about this person? And she's so good at giving those characters, whether it's a toy like Barbie or Tanya Harding, she gives them so much life.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you asked, like, once the production still started coming out, and I think some of the first ones were of Barbie and Ken in the rollerblades. Were the first ones I saw, because I recognized that toy,
right?
Like those rollerblades, and I didn't realize that I had remembered them, but I remembered them, and I kind of was like, oh, nice. They're going for it. Like they're doing this.
Yeah, they're not shying away from the actual
They're not
Barbie.
making like a gritty Barbie or like anything like whatever. Or it's just, oh yeah, they're
going head first into
Barbie
this thing.
movie. This is Barbie fans are going to have things to
not just
like
pink, neon pink,
right,
neon yellow.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I was excited and I saw it in theater and had a great time. It was a pretty full theater, really responsive audience, just the whole hype thing. It was all flowing and it all worked really well for me. On Letterboxd, I gave it a 4.5 stars. And I don't know that I was actually going to give it 5 stars, but I docked it half a star for being an effective commercial. Like I left the movie thinking, I want to buy my kids Barbies.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang it, I didn't want that. I didn't want the commercial to work on me.
It wasn't supposed to work that way. That wasn't the deal.
So at the time I docked it half a star for that.
And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to talk about too, is that we can't shy away from this being a toy tie-in.
It's still a commercial. Yeah.
It's still a commercial. Also, just like everybody's going into this movie with an idea about Barbie beforehand.
Right.
So you gave it 4.5, you said?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have much to add in my first viewing. We already talked about the anticipation. I think we kind of shared that. And I just went to the theater with my wife. You know, we saw it before Oppenheimer and you didn't see Oppenheimer in the theater.
No.
Yeah. And a lot like our Oppenheimer episode, aside from a passing glance at that phenomenon, like I don't think it really actually, we don't need to talk about Barbenheimer that much.
I don't think so. It was a menu. They two unrelated movies happened to be released on the same day.
And in hindsight, now in 2024, it's kind of weird to talk about them that much together.
Yep.
So,
but
anyways, our theater was the same way, full theater. Everyone seemed to be connecting with it. I didn't see anybody walking out. I didn't see anybody, and there was plenty of laughter in the key moments, and we both had a really good time.
Yeah.
And it left me kind of surprised, I guess, in some ways, to see Greta Gerwig also be just so straightforward with the ideas.
You're right.
Which is not a Greta Gerwig thing necessarily.
Right.
But she brought it in this movie.
Yeah.
Just putting the ideas right up at the surface.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of like, it's fun, I'm laughing, and I'm thinking.
Ooh. Right.
And I don't know that surprised me necessarily, but maybe to the depth that it was asking of its audience was a little surprising to me, even though I know there were criticisms of it not going deep enough or not being the right angle on feminism. There's those critiques, but for me, it was kind of like, but how often do you get a summer blockbuster that is right in your face saying like, think about this,
patriarchy, feminism, like just saying those words rather than, oh, that's like patriarchy, like trying to connect those dots. Yeah.
And so, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that in our discussion. So that's the first viewings.
On the rewatch, I watched it with my wife, who then kind of started falling asleep because we have a 7-month-old who still doesn't sleep into the night, which is not what we're talking about here. But I felt, about 45 minutes into the movie, I was like, there might have been some momentum of being in a theater with a crowd.
Yeah.
That worked a little bit of magic. And I kind of wondered, like, is it going to hold up? And then by the end, I feel like it did. Like, it might not be as propulsive and electric, outside of the theater and outside of the hype, but it is still a really surprisingly daring movie in ways that I don't think a lot of people talked about. Maybe more complex than its moments of essay would indicate, and really tender and more beautiful than I remembered it being. And so by the end, I was crying like I was in the theater, and like I do when I watch Little Women. Greta Gerwig gets to me. Like she can tug on my heartstrings, and I know that's not, the measure of a good movie, but I do think that the way she does it, the way she builds to it, is really pretty remarkable. And I think I might now put it at like 4.5. Not like when I first saw it, it was like maybe 5, but I'll say 4.5. Now I think I'm like, yeah, I think 4.5.
4.5 is where you want to keep it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really good movie. And I'm trying to figure out why on my second viewing, it was just a little bit of the shine seemed to kind of wear off a little bit. And I still liked it, still laughed, but there was something about it that I felt was just a little lesser than on a rewatch, as opposed to when I feel like it's a great movie and the rewatch expands it.
Yeah.
Like a rewatch makes you appreciate it even more.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want this to sound like I'm shooting the movie down. And I don't think it's me just kind of writing a backlash.
Yeah.
But there was just something about it where I was just like, okay, so can I watch it now just as a movie? I think it's a really, really good movie. I don't know if it's a great movie.
Yeah.
I would probably at this point put it more at like a 4-star movie for me, which is still a really good movie.
It's still a very good movie. Yeah. I wrote more notes during this movie than I have for a movie.
Oh, wow. We crisscrossed each other because I wrote less than I've ever written for a movie.
But a lot of my notes were kind of processing some of the things I've heard in Backlash.
Okay.
So I haven't like looked up official Backlash,
Well, here's the thing. So before you say that, I want to ask you a question though. Is there a part of you that feels like you can't really not like this movie? Like, I feel like it became an endorsement.
Yeah.
More than more. It became more of a.
Agree.
It became more of a. Did I like this movie? It became more. Do you endorse Barbie or do you not? And I hate that.
Yeah.
So I want this to be. I want us to talk about the ideas.
Yeah.
But I also want us to feel open to say, like, no, I actually think the movie's kind of failing here.
Well, sure, we can agree to that. The backlash that I've heard was it's not feminist enough, that it's kind of stuck in third wave, second wave feminism rather than where feminism is today, which I don't know enough. I don't think about. I think, are we on fifth wave feminism now, or where we are now?
I'm going to be
able to
entirely honest.
Yes,
and this is my Ken moment here. I kind of had to Wikipedia feminism before this conversation because I knew there were waves of feminism and I thought I knew where they kind of were.
Yeah.
But I wanted to kind of get a better idea of like, what exactly are we talking about when we're talking about second wave feminism, third wave feminism? Because that was a lot of the critique.
Yeah.
Was that Greta Gerwig seemed to kind of be stuck maybe in between like second and third wave feminism, and we had moved past that a little bit.
Right.
I don't know how you felt about those critiques. For me, I was kind of like, well, if you're someone who's been steeped in feminism, I can entirely understand why this movie is frustrating for you.
Yeah.
And why maybe it just didn't connect with you because you're not at that place anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But not everybody's at the place.
Right.
In fact, I don't think most of the population is at that place.
Right.
I think Greta Gerwig was making a movie for mainstream America.
Yeah.
Which is behind the times.
And it's not that she's not saying anything that doesn't bear repeating either.
Sure.
I think some of the other backlash I heard is that the movie's actually not feminist, that like they messed up and they made patriarchy too appealing. And like,
because it stole the show, sort of.
It stole the show, right? Yeah. That this is actually a Ken movie rather than a Barbie movie.
Because some of the funniest parts are those parts.
That's what I mean. My like TLDR of that is Ryan Gosling's performance is flashier, so maybe it feels like the movie is about Ken. But I disagree wholeheartedly. If you watch the movie is about Barbie. It's just so happens that Margot Robbie is giving an understated performance, which is not what anybody expected.
Right. Yeah.
but we'll get into that. Some of the other critiques, well, just that it's convoluted. What is it actually saying?
Right.
So I had all these things in my head, and I think there was a part of me that wasn't just buying into I have to endorse this movie. If I don't like this movie, I hate women. But there is a part of me that's aware that we are two men talking about this. And
right.
If we do come down on the movie, there's who are we? And I mean that genuinely.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah.
And so I kind of was, I guess I was watching the movie with, I have to answer these questions. I have to, or at least answer 4 of these questions. And that may or may not be okay. But I do feel like I have come to some conclusions that satisfy those questions for me. And I think the meta-ness of the story is a little unwieldy. The issues that I see happening with the movie that kind of interrupts the momentum are more navigating Barbie Land, real world.
Mm-hmm. Now
Barbie Land is Kendom, but Barbie's still in the real world. Navigating all of those moving parts is just maybe too much.
I feel like I just kind of coasted a little bit more the first time because I was just enjoying the ride.
Mm-hmm.
Upon further inspection, it could be a bit too convoluted to the point where sometimes I think they actually decide to lean a little bit more into the ideas at the expense of the story.
Mm-hmm. So you mean the straightforward, this is a feminist speech, this is a...
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with those being in the movie.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with what they're saying. What I'm saying is that I think, and it's kind of in the middle of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems like there's 2 types of stories going on at the same time. One of which is sort of like a Pinocchio story, where Barbie, in this case, is going on some type of hero's journey and then eventually decides that they want to be a real woman. Mm-hmm. It's not a real boy, it's a real woman. If it had kind of stuck to that as its story, I think the movie could have been tighter. The other type of story I think it's sort of is like a Wizard of Oz type story where Barbie Land is sort of like this Oz type place versus the real world.
A reverse Wizard of Oz.
Exactly. And this is where it just convoluted might just be the best word, where it's just these are 2 great ideas. These are not bad ideas. Mm-hmm. But it kind of crisscrosses those in ways that I'm kind of by the end, it leans on the Pinocchio story for its tenderness, mm-hmm. for its heart.
Mm-hmm.
But by then, it was almost like they were returning to it in a way where I'm I kind of had forgotten that was even the point. It's just a sheer sort of storytelling thing.
Yeah.
Is this actually doing a good job of telling the story of Barbie? Not Barbie the idea, but Barbie the Margot Robbie character of stereotypical Barbie. Around the middle, it kind of loses that. And it does become more about the ideas and the patriarchy and all these things. And the character of stereotypical Barbie gets a little lost in the shuffle there. And then they try to claw it back in the end. Mm-hmm. And it's a tall order. It's a tall task to do any of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't even really want to fault it because I'm kind of you went for it. You went for the fences. And man, it was a lot of fun. There's so many times in this movie where I'm I can't believe she's pulling this off.
Right.
But again, it's at the end of the day, the story has to hold you. And for you, it did because you were saying you were still crying by the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I did the first time I watched it.
Mm-hmm.
And there was something about the rewatch where I was we spent way too much time kind of in this sort of patriarchy, but satire, comedy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm kind of being jerked into this moment that I'm just not feeling as much as I did the first time. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I don't know if any of this is making sense at all.
No, I think it is. I would tend to say that where the movie gets unwieldy is Ken bringing patriarchy back to Barbie Land.
Barbie Land.
I almost wonder what it would be like if we had focused on the Barbie story and then Barbie 2 was Ken brings patriarchy, right? We kind of have 2 movies here.
Yeah, yeah.
And it just seems that Christopher Nolan keeps tying into it. Christopher Nolan can take 3 hours to tell multiple stories. He can take 2.5 hours with Dark Knight to tell 2 stories. He's got the Joker storyline, the Two-Face storyline, right? Because audiences have built up that tolerance for those sorts of movies. They're for whatever reason, superhero movies can be
Well, the reason
close
is
to 3
patriarchy.
hours. Right, exactly.
You know what I
right,
mean? Like that's the
exactly.
reason.
Yeah.
Because and I was just watching. So there's this excellent. I'm going to link to it in our show notes. There's a guy. What's his name? I think he's called Pop Culture Detective. I don't know. It was linked on kottke.org, which is a site I follow for interesting stuff. Anyways, all that to say, he made it was like a 15-minute YouTube video where he used Barbie to just explain patriarchy, because that was a lot of the backlash and a lot of the discourse was actually from a lot of guys on the right who just didn't understand patriarchy.
They thought it was still about horses.
But one of the points he makes that I think is exactly what you're saying is that when the movies are centered around men, it's just a human story when it's a man at the center.
Yeah, right.
It's just a human story.
Yeah.
And because we're so programmed for that being the case, boy, you can take 3 hours to tell a human story.
Right.
And the sad thing is,
story's got to be short.
But the sad thing is, if you're going to have a story centered around a woman, then that movie becomes about womanhood.
Yeah, and you got to get in and get out.
You got to get in and get out. Yeah.
And so I think Barbie would have worked better if they could have done that, taken some time, sort of sorted some things out a little bit. Whereas instead, it's like we got to get Ken to the real world and get Ken back to Barbie Land pretty quickly.
Yeah, right.
And make that switch. But I also think, where I said that Ken takes patriarchy back to Barbie Land would be Barbie 2. I think they needed to address Ken in this movie, because otherwise, without him going on his journey, we've got problems. Like, well, what about the way men are treated? Like, if they show a female-centric world the way they do, where men are sidelined, then what are you saying? Like, is this an anti-feminist movie then? Because we're seeing men as victims here, like that sort of thing.
Sure,
they had to sort Ken out.
Yeah.
So it's got that patriarchy working against it, where they didn't have the leeway to expand the story.
Yeah.
But they also were tackling things that had to be addressed. And I do think it's quick, and I do think it's kind of convoluted at times. And because the fact that where Barbie is mentally in the middle of the story is depressed, she gets lost a little bit. But she's also, not to make excuses, she feels lost, right? Like, so she doesn't know where she fits. Like, how do you kind of show someone feeling they don't know why they're existing for a long time? That can get kind of repetitive and tough to expand on. So there's a part of the fact that she fades out of the story that's mirroring, what she's sort of feeling about her life. Yeah. And I'm not trying to make excuses about it, but I do think that what's happening isn't just a failure.
Right. The one part, though, that I do feel like is a little inconsistent is Barbie Land is supposed to be this place that is free of patriarchy, and then Ken brings patriarchy to Barbie Land. But even before that, the Kens are spiting with each other and fighting with each other anyways out of jealousy, and that itself, like, there were little bits of patriarchy kind of in the original.
What I think they kind of had a matriarchy. Like, I think that's one of the things. They don't lean into it, but one of the things that they're showing is that any sort of domination is bad for a society.
Yes, and that's what I think is profound.
Yeah.
Actually, because I do really think it's profound that Barbie Land is not perfect. It's only perfect to Barbie.
Yeah. And to replace patriarchy with matriarchy, or matriarchy with patriarchy is bad for everybody.
But don't you think, and this is where I get back to it being a little, I'm not asking it to resolve that, but it doesn't even, that's when it decides to split and say, let's go back to the Pinocchio story. Like, they don't present a new type of Barbie Land, really. It mostly just goes back to what it was, right?
It's like not a total matriarchy, but it's like a matriarchy that mirrors our patriarchy.
Sure.
Where they kind of talk about how they get some circuit judge seats, and like they get Ken's will be, and it's sort of said as a joke It feels like it's supposed to be funny in the movie. Kens will be as powerful in Barbie Land as women are in the real world.
And again, I can't fault Greta Gerwig for not solving all of our problems, but it does feel like she's presenting these things, and then sometimes when it's a little bit convenient,
she backs off on it,
backing off a little bit and saying, "Let's go back to this story here."
But where I see that happening, or what I see happening with that, and what I think kind of connects the Pinocchio story to all of that, part of what it seems to be saying is that any sort of oversimplifications miss the point, and they make things worse. And you see that with, all right, the world's totally run by women. Well, that's not good either. Where do men fit in that? Where does Ken fit in that? There is an objectifying of Ken. There is a diminishing of Ken.
They're in a place of servitude.
Right. And they only exist when Barbie looks at them.
Mm-hmm.
Like Ken kind of talks about that. Like, I only feel good about myself when Barbie's looking at me. That's female gaze versus male instead of male gaze, right? Replacing an oversimplified oppressive system with the reverse oversimplified oppressive system is not the solution.
Right.
You also see this oversimplification making things worse, I think, when Sasha does her buzzword takedown of Barbie, where she just spews out an old
litany.
Litany of criticisms against Barbie, but with current day buzzwords, calling her a fascist.
You set the feminist movement back 50 years. You destroy girls' innate sense of worth, and you are killing the planet with your glorification of rampant consumerism.
No, I'm supposed to help you and make you happy and powerful.
Oh, I am powerful. And until you showed up here and declared yourself Barbie, I hadn't thought about you in years, you fascist.
Okay. It's happening again. I have to. Will you excuse me? It was really nice.
But like Sasha herself is an oversimplified rejection of Barbie, which is not good for her.
Right.
Right.
But Sasha is that feminist critique of Barbie.
Right. But I think it's sort of saying that, I'll keep saying the word oversimplified, critique is wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And not helpful.
Yeah.
And just implementing patriarchy is wrong and not helpful.
Yeah.
And
let me go back. Do you think it's what Sasha is saying is not wrong, though? It's just not the full picture, right?
Right.
I mean, it's not wrong.
I mean, wrong in like not the correct way to approach it.
I see. Okay.
Not that the critiques are not valid. I just, they're not the whole picture.
Right.
So it's like Barbie Land is then like this unrealistic world of women that just ends up replacing expectations that are similarly damaging to women. Everybody talks about the America Ferrera speech, which I do think is a great speech. I also would agree with the criticism that this is not the first time people have said this.
Right.
Like,
it's not new.
Right. But it bears repeating.
Sure.
Because it's not fixed.
It's like, not new, but it's still true.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I think, though, that what Barbie says before that is key to kind of understanding this critique of Barbie Land that the movie seems to be putting forward.
I'm not stereotypical Barbie pretty.
Note to the filmmakers, Margot Robbie is the wrong person to cast if you want to make this point.
You're beautiful. It's not just that. I'm not smart enough to be interesting.
You're so smart.
I can't do brain surgery. I've never flown a plane. I'm not the president. No one on the Supreme Court is me. I'm not good enough for anything.
She says, I've never flown a plane. I'm not the president. How can stereotypical Barbie be woman enough? Because I've never done all these things.
Yeah.
To say women can never do those things is damaging. To say women have to do these things is damaging.
Yeah.
And so that's where Barbie's like Pinocchio sort of stuff comes to this, and where those like systemic sort of critiques are joining with that Pinocchio story, because that's where Barbie kind of wrestles with the idea of, well, what does it mean to be human? And that's where this movie is a human story. And that's why the end actually, this time, that's why the end made me cry. Not just because it was like, oh man, look at that baby. But but it was because I saw that this movie is about being human and all the ways we try to make sense of that.
Yeah, right.
And the world invites us to oversimplify it and to buy into this system, reject this system, buy into this criticism, reject this doll, whatever. And it's sort of saying, are we going to cling to those systems that tell us they're making sense of the world? That they're not actually like making sense of things. They're just objectifying people. And maybe even like Barbie objectifying ourselves in an attempt to avoid those tough questions. Or do we say yes, which like, I think that's one of the things that made me cry was Barbie just sees that montage and she says, yes.
Yes.
So I do see a marriage of the Pinocchio story and the systems because she feels dissatisfied. She wants to be a real woman because those oversimplified systems aren't cutting it for her. And before she says that, she says something like, I want to be a part of the people that make meaning, not the thing that's made. I want to do the imagining, not be the idea. And that is, I think, a distillation of objectification. Are you the thing that's made? Are you the idea? Or are you a part of making meaning, a part of imagining?
Yeah.
And you can be that and be ordinary Barbie. We need to see each other as imaginers, as meaning makers, no matter who they are. So that to me is where all of that kind of comes together.
Sure.
And
I can see that.
By the end of the movie, I was like, yes, this is, I would say, a great movie. Like it does stick that landing.
Yeah, I think if you expand what that meaning is to what you're saying, then yeah, that's a very powerful thing. And maybe I was just a little misdirected where it was kind of like, I don't know if I'm buying that she would want to be a woman because what part of the real world did she like? I mean, she sees the montage, she sees what it means to be human, but she's still deciding to move into this world that is very decidedly patriarchal still.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful sentiment, but again, it sort of leaves the systems then hanging. Like the world that she's stepping into is not going to accept that necessarily.
Right.
It's still going to be the world that you and I live in. The Barbie land is somewhat patched up, but it's still Barbie land. I think if you look at it your way and you keep it at the very sort of individual level, it can be a very powerful thing. It can get frustrating when you're like, okay, but now what? How do we change this? How do we change these systems? And maybe that's not what the movie set out to do, but it certainly spent a lot of time portraying these systems in a way that made you think, boy, we really should be thinking about how to fix this, right? Like we should be thinking about how to fix this.
It's also very focused on the system's effect on the individual.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, and I did notice this time, because my memory of the first time was that when Ken brings patriarchy in, he becomes happy. And that's not really true.
No, he's not. Right.
And that I think is also a very profound thing this movie is saying is that patriarchy isn't even good for men.
Right. And matriarchy isn't good for Barbie either. right. Yeah.
They think they are. They're tricking themselves into thinking they are. Maybe they even are at first, but it does not take long for Ken to just sort of be sad.
Yeah. And clinging to patriarchy more than anything else. Right. So that's where, like I say, the movie is saying, like, when faced with the messiness of being a human, do we cling to the systems?
Yeah, right.
Or do we say, yes, I'm gonna struggle through this messiness? And I think what's important because I take your point, Barbie's going to a real world, which we know the real world.
Right.
But what we have to remember is she's done being a doll. And there's something beautiful about that where, because we know the real world, we can get really tired of being human and might think a utopia, a world where, but it is still better to be a human struggling than to be the thing that's made. This is like Jean-Paul Sartre, existentialism is a humanism sort of stuff here that, like, you want to believe that there's like a God who made you. Well, like, what makes you different from a paper cutter then? We are more than paper cutters. We are more than dolls. We are more than objects. And for Barbie, it seems like living in a world that is still part of a broken system, but being human is better than being literally an object. Like she acknowledged, she saw that being a human is not easy. It's really messy, but it's worth it. And it's beautiful and it's hard and it's full of contradictions and it's...
Yeah. What Greta Gerwig saw in Barbie that I think is maybe the most core thing that I appreciate that she actually wrestled with is that you're talking about humanity being full of contradictions, but Barbie is full of contradictions.
Yes.
And Greta Gerwig just like leaned into all of them.
Right.
I really love that she didn't try to just make a case for Barbie. She didn't even try to argue with the criticisms, really.
Right.
I mean, she just kind of leaned into the contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about this being a messy movie, it's kind of like, well, what did you expect?
Yeah.
Like Barbie's a really
You can't do
messy
this clean.
thing.
Yeah.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
And Barbie has always been contradictory and has always been controversial.
They even leaned into the controversy and contradictory nature of the inventor of Barbie.
Yeah, right.
Like they're like, and she was kind of a tax evasionist sort of criminal. Like, they're like, don't think that we are deifying this woman.
Right. Which, by the way, I in preparation for this episode, there's a documentary on Hulu called Tiny Shoulders that I really recommend because it's actually about Barbie in about 2014, 2016 when they kind of redid Barbie. But you are actually in the rooms, which, by the way, one thing that this movie, I get it why they did it for the point of having like Will Ferrell and the whole board of men.
We haven't even talked about
which we haven't talked about yet. But in real life, you look at the documentary, and I mean, it's really, especially within the, I don't know if they have like a Barbie division or whatever, but like in the room where they're talking about Barbie, it's all women.
Oh, okay.
The head of design is a woman. The communications person for Barbie is a woman. And my point in all of this is that it's not just Greta Gerwig wrestling with Barbie. Like the people who create Barbie wrestle with this. It's not like they're not aware of feminism. They are not. It's not like they're not aware of the criticisms of Barbie, and yet they still, for whatever reason, feel this is a worthwhile product to put out there. Because, and this was another, I'll link to it in the show notes. But it was someone who wrote a Barbie essay in the New York Times the day the movie came out. She was a Barbie expert, and she kind of talks about how, if you look at Barbie as a reflection of society, it can be a little damning.
Yeah.
But she says Barbie has always served also as a vessel. And that Barbie has been a vessel that you could use to talk about what womanhood is and what womanhood can be. That is purporting to be sort of simultaneously the ideal of womanhood, but also the potential of womanhood.
Right.
And so it's like you're going to have some people who see that as a problem.
Yeah.
And you're going to see some people that see that as a hope, and you're also going to see some people who see like, but this is about conformity.
Sure.
And then you're going to see some people who see it as, but it's also about what can be.
Yeah.
It has always been a warts and all reflection of society.
Yeah.
And well, we are at least at a point now where Barbie, after I think it was like 56 years, finally said, yeah, we should probably have some different body types here.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm getting off topic, but it's I'm getting to the point of Barbie is a messy concept.
Yeah. Well, so what I saw watching it this time was the movie is sort of advocating we need a mix of aspiration and realistic. And maybe there's nothing more poignant of a symbol of that than putting Barbie, this idealized vision of potential, and putting her in the real world and saying like,
it sticks out.
Yeah, like it sticks out. But like, what happens when idealized potential interacts with realism? There's Barbie too. I don't know.
Sure.
We're putting it on wax. So I think that this makes it Barbie 2, an adapted screenplay of our podcast, or at least story by Ryan Ebling.
Story by Ryan Ebling for sure.
So
maybe co-written by Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig.
I would honestly be fine with a story by Ryan Ebling, screenplay by Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig.
I think that's fair.
Then the three of us would get nominated, and I would let them talk.
Of course.
But no, I that was something that came through because watching it this time, I'm like, Barbie Land is not being painted as the good, but it's also not painted as a bad idea, right? Like that women especially, or just generally marginalized groups, need aspirational visions. But you also need realism because you can't say like, oh man, we need a world run by women where it's a matriarchy. Well, that's going to have its problems too.
So we've talked a lot about I guess what brought to mind things that we watched in Barbie. We actually haven't talked that much about the film.
And I wanted to. I really want to.
And so let's just kind of spend maybe this last bit here just talking about what is this movie doing that you think is just I mean, this is the thing. You don't make $1 billion unless it's working on some level.
Almost $1.5 billion, right?
So even if I'm saying it could be convoluted, it's like a little messy. At the end of the day, it's like she somehow pulled this off, and there's a lot of reasons for that.
I really do think it's a great movie. Even if you have trouble with the messiness, I still think this is a great movie, and I want to start with Margot Robbie's performance.
Right.
I think it is underrated.
I will say she really should have been nominated for Best Actress. I
think everybody should rewatch this movie and really just focus on Margot Robbie because she is so good. She's got the comedy chops. She's got the bubbly side.
The physical performance. The part where she does where she just kind of sits
rolls
down
over
and
on the
folds over her eyes,
side, but her hips stay stacked like a doll would be.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just incredible.
That's like Chaplin-esque,
yes,
physical comedy there.
Any kind of measure you want to put for comedy, she's nailing it with this performance. But she also is so grounded. If you don't have Margot Robbie grounding this movie,
it doesn't
Ryan
work.
Gosling looks insane.
The way that she interacts with Ken, I mean, those are characters working off each other. So Ryan Gosling is, he is great. Come on.
He really is.
He's so funny.
I'm not saying he's not.
Because there's a whole other way in which all that comedy could have just gone flat.
Yeah.
But you're right. It works because he's working off of Margot Robbie, who is completely centering this. She's centering this movie. Mm-hmm. She is such a good foundation. I think I was maybe joking at the beginning saying who else could play Barbie because there's the physical appearance, which again is there.
Yeah.
But my God, it's just
who else could do everything that was required of this
role. Who could do everything of saying, because this is an elevated Barbie movie. Mm-hmm. And Margot Robbie's just game for it all.
Yeah.
She's fearless.
She's not the only person who could play Barbie looks-wise.
Right.
But she is the only person who could play this Barbie.
Right.
One of the great actors of today.
Yeah. But we have to talk about the other thing that I think makes this movie work, centers it, just sells it, is the production design.
Yes.
Is the costume design. It is just every little detail. And I'm someone who I played Barbies with my sister, actually. I'm no Barbie expert, but it just looked like how I'd expected. I expected Barbie Land to look like that.
Yeah. Yeah. They nailed it.
Because there's a lot of decisions you have to make, like how much do we make this just like the toy, and how much do we make this like a real version of the toy? So like the dream house.
The bed plastic?
Do we make the dream house open in the front?
Yeah.
Or do we make it a house?
Yeah.
Those are all decisions that have to be made, and I feel like they really went for just keeping it just the right amount of toyness.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was reading they scaled everything to like 23%. Like that's why Barbie's pretty close to the ceiling and looks a little big for her car.
Yeah,
because Barbie's a little too big for all of the accessories.
Yeah,
but yeah, just that level of detail.
Right.
They went with that, and no water in the pools and no water from the shower and like just all of those things that like when you play, that's what they did. They were like, if you were playing with this, could it happen?
Yeah.
No, then we won't do it. There's that like perfect production design. But then one thing that I love is they went full bore weird. They were like, we're going to do a Ken dance number. This is going to be a 50s dance number. This is going to be an 80s dance number. This is going to be a 70s dance number. This is going to be every dance number.
And that to me is like, and I'm there for it. This is Greta Gerwig flexing.
Yes.
Like, let me show you how to make a movie.
Watch what happens when you give me a budget.
This is a Gene Kelly level, American in Paris.
Unbelievable.
Like, so well coordinated, not just with the dancers and the background, but like, look at how the camera's moving. Look at how the camera's moving.
It's
like,
so good. When they do that like rhombus around the two Kens fighting, and the lines are just perfect, and the lighting, that is straight out of a classic 50s musical.
Yeah, and it's throwback, but it feels
so
now.
But it's so weird.
I'm just Ken. Anywhere else I'd be a 10. My destiny to live and die a life of blonde fragility. I'm just Ken.
I think that's part of the success. That it's just we're going for it.
Yeah.
We are not going to go halfway.
Oh, and of all the gags you could do to make fun of the patriarchy or male behavior,
Right.
That's just
boil
a really
it down to those pathetic, sort of predictable. He's going to play guitar. He's going to explain Godfather.
That one hurt.
They all hurt.
That one hurt.
They all hit.
The
too close to
Godfather
home.
hurt the most because I want to say.
Did you make Andrea watch The Godfather?
I won't say I made her, but Andrea said I've never actually seen The Godfather, and I was like, I've been wanting to rewatch The Godfather. Let's watch it. And it is. I mean, come on. Godfather is just
It's a good movie. It's a great movie.
that might be a perfect movie.
I think it is a perfect movie.
And that might just be the Ken and me saying that. But we were doing that, like we watched it in chunks.
Yeah. Oh,
we
were you?
We were in the middle of watching Godfather when we went to the theater and saw Barbie. And it's not so much that we were watching Godfather, but I was thinking, I'm like, oh my God, have I been explaining what's so great about this movie to Andrea the whole time? That hurts.
Yeah.
I tell you what, though, I stopped doing that.
That's good. You learned.
It takes sometimes
that
you just
messiness.
get that's progress, right?
Yeah. You're a real ally, Nate.
A real Alan.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great too, Michael Cera.
Yeah.
To me, it's not a mystery why this movie was a hit. It really is great, I think. It's fun and it's weird and it's messy and unapologetic, and I think it's great for that.
Yeah. All right. So
I mean, I'm going to keep it 4.5 stars. For me, I think I would say this is a great movie. I'm not going to hate you if you can't say the same.
It's a damn good movie. I think I'll probably leave it at 4.
Well, so are we just is this a mutual understanding, or is that a quibble to say that we're not best buds on this?
No, I think it's because I was very sort of illuminated by a lot of the stuff that you kind of brought. Yeah, no, I think it's a mutual understanding.
Not best buds is what I'm asking.
Oh, yeah. Well, we could be best buds.
Yeah, why not? Why not? Yeah, we don't need to beat each other off about this.
Yeah, right. I don't have anything more to say about that. All right, well,
let's talk about what we're going to do next time.
Sounds like a plan. So for the next episode, and you really can't ever hold us to any of our plans because, I would consider this also maybe part of breaking new ground is saying that we're going to do something and then not doing it. Breaking new ground in that level. So we've been saying we're going to be doing these revisiting, rewatching. I've been meaning to rewatch that kind of things. But the other thing is, I have really been meaning to watch
for the first time, American Fiction. Me too.
And neither of us have had a chance to see it yet.
But it's now on Amazon Prime.
Right. It's just kind of one of those things where it's just like, you want to watch it, I want to watch it.
Mm-hmm. So we
need to do an episode.
We're still revisiting 2023.
Right. So
we're just not rewatching, unless we watch it twice. I don't know.
And maybe I will. Who's to stop me?
I don't think anybody.
No.
I mean, to your point,
there's
no one there to stop
There's no one
you.
there to stop me. So maybe,
and I would say there's nothing stopping you.
No, and there's nothing stopping you either from watching it twice. I don't think.
No, yeah, no. If there's no one and nothing to stop you,
then there's no one and nothing
to stop
you. Therefore, in conclusion,
we're going to do American Fiction for our next episode.
And maybe watch it twice.
1-2-1. Maybe twice.
Maybe twice.
Yeah.
No one's going to stop us.
Right.
So that's the plan.
I like that plan.
So directed by Cord Jefferson.
Right.
Did an adapted screenplay from Percival Everett, who's an author that we both kind of recently got into a little bit. Mostly I did because of you. You recommended...
he's incredible.
Dr. No to me, and I had read The Trees, and great author.
Have you read Erasure?
No, and maybe I'll do that.
I think you should.
Who's to stop me?
No one.
Maybe I'll read the book.
You should.
You have.
I have. Oh yeah, I read the book.
And it's good book?
Yeah, it's a great book.
I mean, you want to watch the movie, so I'm assuming it must be okay.
Yeah. No, it's a great book.
Percival Everett, everything I've read so far has been really enjoyable.
He's incredible. I can't say enough good things about Percival Everett, and I dare you to try to stop me.
No one's going to stop me. Not in this room.
Not in this. No. None of these.
No,
none of these folks.
I would never. But yeah, American Fiction. I'm excited about this. Jeffrey Wright. I mean, you can't go wrong.
No.
Right?
That's. I mean, I don't even think you meant to do that, but that's incredible.
So this is all, again, part of us revisiting last year. And so hopefully you've been joining us on this ride.
Yeah.
And so if you've got some opinions on anything, we've talked about Oppenheimer, we've talked about Barbie, we're going to be talking about American Fiction. So if you've got any thoughts on any three of those movies, we would really highly encourage that.
Yeah.
But before we leave, remember that we're actually going to be taking next month off.
Right.
This won't drop until July. But our lines are open.
Yeah.
All the time. 24/7.
Right.
I don't get a whole lot of sleep.
That operator standing by.
Right. And the operator.
We're still just on one operator.
Part-time.
Hard-working.
Part-time. But part-time.
I sometimes feel like we take advantage of how willing they are to do the hard work.
Right.
Doing the work of two part-time people.
Because we're too cheap to hire full-time.
Yeah. Well, they have other stuff going, too. They were looking for part-time.
It's a mutual... It works for both of us.
They've said if it got to the point that it got into full-time territory, they would have to step away because of everything else they've got going on.
Right. So we supplement.
I
that
just
with
don't
some
want people to
attention
think that we're just being cheap and giving a full-time
well, we
job
are
to
cheap.
a part-time.
We don't have a lot of money.
Not just being cheap.
Not just being
and
cheap.
giving a full-time job and making it part-time just to avoid the benefits. This is what they were looking for.
It's an arrangement that's mutual.
Yeah.
Even though they do probably work more than
part-time. They do a lot of work
in
in their part-time, but not more than is reasonable to expect from a part-time position.
Somewhere between part-time and full-time, but not quite full-time so that we have to say it's full-time.
They don't want
I know they don't want it. They
full-time
don't want it.
is what I'm
They don't want
saying.
it. I know. They don't want it. And we can't afford it.
But that's secondary.
So it's mutual.
That's secondary.
It's mutual is what I'm saying.
I do feel like if we got to the point where we needed full-time, we could afford full-time, but we just don't. I feel like you're making it sound like we are not fair compensators of our operator.
No, we are. We are nothing if not fair employers.
Yeah.
My whole point in this is that the lines are open 24/7.
Okay. Part-time.
Part-time. The operator is their part-time.
Yeah, but if the lines are open 24/7.
24/7.
Yeah, they'll get to it eventually.
So, to listen to or comment on this or any of our past episodes, find us at canwestillbefriends.net or email us at feedback@canwestillbefriends.net. You can find us on Facebook at Can We Still Be Friends Podcast or Instagram and Threads at Can We Still Be Friends Pod. If you'd like to leave us a voice message and be featured on the podcast, call us at 847-306-9532 or email us a voice memo.
As always, we'd love it if you could subscribe and leave us a rating or a review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts and they allow you to review it. Those ratings really help spread the word about our show. Can We Still Be Friends is written and produced by Ryan Ebling and Nate Goss and edited by Nate Goss. Thanks for listening.
We'll catch you next time.